Well, joining me now for more on this is Matthew Holroyd in our social media news desk, theCUBE. Matthew, these big European countries now joining an already growing list. What pictures does this paint across Europe?
Well, today's events, Alistair, they've really had the chain domino effect. You're seeing much of Western Europe now that have suspended this vaccine developed by Oxford University and AstraZeneca, the latest big players in the EU, France, Italy and Germany. That's followed in the footsteps of the Netherlands, Denmark, Ireland. We've also seen non-EU nations as well, Iceland and Norway, also taking action. Meanwhile, you've got other countries, the likes of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. Those countries have all suspended specific batches, 2 in total, which believed to be linked to these reports of blood clotting. We've seen other actions also being taken, but also worth noting is the fact that here in Portugal, that today the Public Health Authority have said that they see no reason why the vaccine cannot continue to be administered, and also further afield as well, Thailand, who initially suspended the vaccine, they've also since reinstated it as part of their rollout.
And the regulators, they're saying no evidence of a link. And what about the World Health Organization as well?
Exactly, that's the most important point to say. Both the European Medicines Agency and the World Health Organization have both said that there is no evidence of a direct causal link between this vaccine and blood clotting. The European Medicines Agency, they have stood by this. They say they are continuing to investigate this matter, but currently no evidence of a link. In terms of what they have put out on social media and in terms of a statement, the EMA have pointed back to previous statements which say that the vaccine's benefits continue to outweigh any potential risk of side effects. They are continuing an investigation, but we've also heard from the World Health Organization. They have said that it's perfectly normal, it's perfectly procedural for these kind of vaccines to be investigated, countries to report potential issues, but they have also stressed that it's so important to them that vaccine campaigns are allowed to continue during this pandemic.
And what about AstraZeneca? It's also already suffered from a bit of a bad press for various reasons. What has the company had to say?
Well, they've also pointed to a clinical study which is backed up by the World Health Authorities. They've said that out of a total of 5 million people in the EU who have taken this vaccine, just 37 reported cases of blood clotting have been reported. But important to note here, at the bottom of this statement, they say that that number is much lower than they would normally expect to occur in a general population of this size. And it is similar to other licensed COVID-19 vaccines. So they're sticking by their product, unsurprisingly. But as you say, this is a huge setback for them. This is a vaccine that has formed the bulk of the 347 million of vaccines that the COVAX scheme from the UN and the World Health Organization have put out. They've also had question marks previously about supply, and also we've seen other countries previously suspending them for over 65s. This is just one of 4 vaccines that have been approved by the World Health Organization. We're yet to hear from the company since France and those other countries have taken action, but they're always likely to support their own vaccine and point to the science behind it.
Now, vaccinations generally, of course, are seen as the way out of the pandemic. You and the CUBE team have been studying vaccine hesitancy and online disinformation. What impact do you think could these moves have?
It's going to have a huge impact. Firstly, on that point about disinformation, this is only likely to feed the anti-vax narrative. Those people who are deliberately claiming that there is no evidence behind vaccines that support them, this is only going to likely to add to those claims. We're seeing others as well with regard to vaccine hesitancy. Those people who are perhaps concerned, genuinely question marks about vaccines, this is going to add to this uncertainty, particularly because we're seeing countries that just a few days ago said that this vaccine, they saw no reason to stop unrolling it. Now they've gone back on that statement, a bit of a U-turn. They've said that this vaccine is going to be suspended now. This is only going to add to those question marks and really add to the concerns. And of course, the World Health Organization, at the start of this pandemic, Alistair, they said that this was an infodemic, the dangers of an infodemic of misinformation. This situation is only likely to deteriorate that.
Matthew, thanks very much for that analysis. Well, let's see more now about what some experts have to say. Joining us is Adam Finn, who chairs an advisory group on immunisation for the World Health Organization in Europe. Thanks very much for joining us on Euronews tonight. As we've been hearing, what started as a trickle last week now looks like it's becoming a flood of countries suspending the use of AstraZeneca. What do you think of all these moves?
Hi, Alistair. Well, I think it's very unfortunate because this is clearly, as your correspondent just said, this is clearly going to do reputational damage to the vaccine, even though there's no evidence at all that there's a problem. So I think it's very unfortunate that the programs are being held up, but I think it's also very unfortunate that these kind of worrying messages are being put out by governments around Europe when what they really need to be doing is immunising their populations as fast as possible.
So you think that European governments are being overly cautious, and yet a lot of people, well, some people seem to be reporting blood clots having taken doses of the vaccine?
Yes, we've been given more doses of the vaccine than any other country in Europe, in the UK. Many millions of people have received the vaccine as well as the Pfizer vaccine. We're seeing reports of people with thrombosis and blood clots that are well below the levels that we normally expect to see when there's no vaccination program going on. So there's really no signal at all that there's a problem. Of course, people are having blood clots. People have blood clots all the time. And if you're immunizing very large numbers of people, inevitably some of them will have those blood clots after they've received a vaccine. It's human nature to assume there's some kind of a link, but in reality, there's no evidence at all that there is. And so in the meantime, we need actually to be being much less cautious and much more brave about the need to get on and immunize people and stop cases of COVID and people being hospitalized and dying of the infection, which we know this vaccine can prevent.
Now, vaccinations is heralded as the way out of or one of the leading way out of the pandemic. The rollout has already been pretty sluggish across Europe. What impact do you think is this going to have?
Well, it can't do anything but harm. I mean, it's bound to hold things up. But even once things get going again, once the authorities have had adequate reassurance that there is no problem, it still will take them longer to get things going because people will inevitably have had doubts sowed in their minds about this vaccine, which actually we know to be highly effective and to be very safe. So I think inevitably some damage will have been done to the progress of the programs across Europe. And of course, this is a vaccine that is being made available across the world. And the decisions that are being made in Europe today will resonate right around the world and potentially do harm to those programs as well. So this is a very unfortunate development.
Well, given those developments and despite what you've been saying, I mean, what do you say to people who might still think, ooh, better be careful, no smoke without fire? You know, what's your message to people who might otherwise be in line for vaccinations?
My message is a very clear one. We've just completed a study over the last 2 or 3 months in Bristol, where I live in the UK, looking at all of the folks coming into hospital with pneumonia and examining exactly how effective this vaccine is to prevent people from coming in to hospital and dying. And it's highly effective after just one dose. We're seeing effectiveness of around 80% in people in their 80s with all sorts of other underlying comorbidities. So this is a highly effective vaccine. It's a vaccine with a very good safety record, and it's very urgent that if you're offered a dose of this vaccine, you should get on and receive it without any delay.